Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the World Islamic Economic Forum Foundation and SIDC's Power Talk on the post-pandemic economic landscape. My name is Tehmina Kaoosji and it's my pleasure to moderate today's insightful session. Our theme for this Power Talk is building resilient industries amidst the current challenges of a global pandemic, which has both halted as well as redefined globalization as we know it. It's timely for us to gain insights thus on next steps towards reviving economic activity and remaining competitive in a post-pandemic era, especially with the key role played by technology in industry's future growth. We'll thus be discussing three critical sectors, ladies and gentlemen: manufacturing, agriculture, and oil and gas, heavily impacted by COVID-19, with case studies by our distinguished keynote speakers, so we may learn from their successes and how they also overcame the challenges. Please allow me to quickly take us through the structure for today's Power Talk. We'll begin with 20-minute presentations by each of our three keynote speakers, followed by a 5-minute discussion between them and myself, before we move into a 20-minute session exclusively for audience questions. As such, I invite all our participants today to keep your thinking caps on and key in your queries all through the Power Talk. We'll address as many as possible to make the most of our keynote speakers' breadth of expertise. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's now welcome our esteemed speakers, beginning with Mattias, Head of Cabinet and Commissioner for Agriculture for the European Commission in Belgium. Mattias first joined the European Commission in 2008 as Directorate General for Development and Relations with African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. Mattias has served as the Deputy Chief of Mission and Head of the Political Section at the EU Delegation to Lebanon in Beirut, and as the Consul General of the Republic of Poland in New York. In addition to his work with the EU for almost 10 years, Mattias has been associated with the prestigious Sobieski Institute in Warsaw as an expert on the EU as well as foreign policy. Welcome, Mattias.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
It's our pleasure too. Next, we have joining us Yang Berbahagia Datuk Kamarul Rizwan Muhammad, Group CEO of USMA Berhad Malaysia, one of Malaysia's leading OGSE companies providing integrated services locally and for international markets. Now, USMA has recent diversifications into new growth areas like new energy, late life assets, and digitization sectors. Datuk Kamarul also serves as director for 10 companies and is a member of the advisory panels for multiple organizations and higher education institutions. His notable awards include Most Promising Entrepreneur at the Asia Pacific Entrepreneurship Awards. Hello, Datuk Kamarul, welcome.
Hello, Tehmina.
Pleasure to have you with us. And rounding off our panel is Mattias Andersson, founder and CEO of MTEK Industry, a Swedish information systems company. Now, MTEK specializes in the digitization of manufacturing information for unparalleled efficiency gains. Dubbed the Wizard from Alpha, Mattias aims to revamp the global manufacturing industry to be sustainable and efficient through full understanding of information from the production floor. Mattias has also been an entrepreneur for over 2 decades, with startups focused on improving information connectivity across a wide range of industries, from electronics to animal health. He began his career at Nokia and SCI. Hello, Mattias. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here. Honored to be part of this panel today.
Thank you once again. Gentlemen, we appreciate all your taking the time to be with us virtually. Allow me to begin today's session by handing over the floor firstly to Mattias Andersson to present his thoughts on our topic of the day, building resilient industries in a post-pandemic landscape, looking in depth at the manufacturing sector. Mattias, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Tehmina, and it's once again, it's an honor to be part of this distinguished panel, and it's a pleasure to be standing in front of all you at WIEF and SIDC. So what I'd like to talk about today is about the challenges that we now see within this pandemic situation, as well as actually looking back a little bit into history. What have we come from and where are we heading as well? And what can we do about it to help support the manufacturing industry to act more global and to be more digitized. So I will actually start by sharing my screen and doing a presentation on this. So if you bear with me, I will get the technology up and working here. So once again, my name is Mattias Andersson. I'm the CEO and founder of MTEK Industry. I've been working within manufacturing industry for the last 25 years. I was actually one of the 6 members of the Nokia Data Management Group some 25 years ago when we actually developed and deployed the first neural networks in closed loop machine learning. So if all of you remember the old 6150 phone, the brick, one of the brick phones, we were actually able to predict the process outcome of that in running manufacturing. I've been working in 68 different countries, been helping companies to reach operational excellence, helping to reduce changeover times, to help production companies design better products. At the end of the day, it's all about helping companies to understand where waste is. And now, during this pandemic situation we're at, we all see that the digital maturity has taken so many leaps forward, and everyone is now very much acquainted to be using the latest and the greatest tools for communication. So despite this big challenge that we're at right now, where the pandemic places a lot of stress onto people, to companies, to nations, I believe that we're going to exit this pandemic situation coming closer together. And I think we can do that by using the digital tools that we have. So looking through the major challenges that we see in industry, and we have seen this for the last 20 years, is that we have a demographic challenge. We have an aging workforce. We have always a challenge to find sufficiently skilled workforce, which I also do believe that digitalization is one of the key elements to help us solve that. Looking through the supply chain, just taking the recent event in the Suez Canal, where the ship actually managed to block the transportation for several days, causing major disruptions to local as well as global supply chains. We are not sufficiently prepared for these type of disruptions. As we see, the COVID-19 situation has been tremendous, impacting individuals, populations, as well as companies and nations. And what we see there is that the capability we have to be prepared for such events is now become more and more important, and thus the reason for this seminar today, talking about how can we create a resilient industry that becomes less dependent on the different national initiatives, and making sure that we can collaborate closer. We also have, as we see it, a huge responsibility to take care of about the environmental impact. We can't continue to transport goods back and forth just looking for the cheapest labor cost. We need to look upon where we can create the most value closest to the clients. And of course, this today and the way they've been working, now this is proven during the pandemic that this is not sustainable. We need to make sure that we can create manufacturing flows that are more visible, more transparent, as well as more focused on value creation, where the humans are the key element to this. And of course, coming through the history, where we've had a very much siloed approach to manufacturing, where we always produce in countries of lower labor cost, and not seeing the value that humans can actually bring to products and supply chains. And here comes digitalization as one of the most important tools. And once again, now COVID has actually highlighted the challenge that we're under. Thankfully now, the digital maturity has increased tenfold or even more, that now everyone is fully acquainted to use these tools of WebEx and Zoom and Teams, that actually allows us to bring people together much faster. Myself, I used to be traveling way too much before, and now I can just connect, and I can have instant connections to people all around the globe. I did have that opportunity before, but I would say thanks to COVID, this has actually brought myself closer to my clients and to my friends and to my partners around the globe, because now my information is merely just a click away. So this is one of the challenges that we see, and once again, COVID is a multiplier to this. And thankfully, there will become a day where COVID is just merely history, and we can start work together as we used to do in a different way. The new normal will be a lesser travel, better visibility, and a much more approach to digital tools, and using that all the way down through education in the lower school ages. So what is actually the root cause of these challenges? Not just COVID as such, but we have been struggling for the last 20, 25 years, as long as I've been in the industry, and of course also before that, with a very much lack of visibility. We used to produce products with a focus on the highest volume and the lowest mix, and we were using everything in order to produce as many units as possible at the lowest labor cost as possible. And of course, the trend has been to move manufacturing to countries which has kept the labor costs pretty low, and by that also with the firm focus to further develop the nation, to make sure that people are more trained and are capable of having a higher education to get the economy up and running. And I've been spending time in all around the globe within different manufacturing sites, and I see a big trend shift in this. I see that manufacturing companies that are very well developed, that has been adopting the Toyota way of production and the lean philosophies, actually see a much more focus on the human contribution to manufacturing. And this might seem as a contradiction. Everyone now speaks about robotics and AI and those lights out factories. At the same time, there is so much to do on just digitizing human labor. And in order to capture all the value that humans create, still AI can't provide creativity, and still people need to come to work and spend their days providing value to their employer and to their society. And one of the main things as well, coming back to this, is the environmental impact. We have to make sure that we can have a continued sustainability approach to everything that we do, the consumption patterns, the manufacturing patterns, the supply chain setup, and the design, to make sure that the consumers, at the end of the day, being you and me and everyone around us, we have a world to hand over to our kids and our grandkids. So we have to have the sustainability approach extremely high on the agenda. On everything that we do, we need to make sure that we actually create a world that we're capable of living in always also tomorrow. So digitalization as a tool, how can we use that in our daily work? How can you use that in order to provide more value to the people, to the society, and to the companies, and to the products? And my personal belief is that now, using the pandemic situation as an alarm clock, as well as a wake-up call, to understand what can we do to become way more efficient in the way that we design products, in the way that we manufacture products, and the way that we provide value to end customers. My personal belief is one of the everyone relates to the Amazon experience, where Amazon has managed to create a situation where they're very close to their consumers, and the consumers can, with merely a click, acquire products to get delivered in just a matter of hours or days. We are actually entering that phase into manufacturing as well. And in order for us to be able to have the Amazon experience of manufacturing, we need to digitize, knowing that that is one of the success factors of Amazon. So if we can digitally link and create transparency in supply chain and within manufacturing, and add the next level analytics to cross-correlate relations, product performance, track and trace of products and processes, as well as being able to add the human aspect of value creation to manufacturing, that's where I believe that we have the near future and also the future competitiveness that comes from there. So from the perspective of building a resilient industry, in order to move forward and to come out of the pandemic situation better standing with a more competitive offering and a more compelling offering, as well as understanding the end consumer desires, which every one of us as individuals are always concerned about sustainability. And if we can create that link and having the capability to digitize every part of the manufacturing process and every level of the supply chain, and being able to visualize the performance of products, processes, components and modules to understand and be able to predict the process outcome. This will actually allow us to do more with less, not actually reduce the waste of standing still, reduce the waste of lead time, or the 7+1 waste as the lean philosophers have taught us. And also the way to do this is that we believe that if we can connect systems all across the supply chains, not just within a factory, but also across factories, and within that also be able to cross-correlate different process performances, we are already able to predict performance of products. We can actually see quality issues coming up. We can reduce standstill of machines. And at the end of the day, we will start to eliminate waste that brings us higher value. Also, the same way that we consume products today is not sustainable in the long term. But I do believe that with the right digital tools and the right digital methodologies, we will be able to actually visualize where the weakness in the supply chains are, where the weaknesses in the product designs are, as well as better to understand what the consumer actually wants, when they want it, and how they want it. So at the end of the day, every one of us as individuals, we are very concerned about the brand value of where we are buying, and we are not wanting to buy products that fails, the products that has defects. And also there we have a great opportunity to use digital tools of today to actually have a better quality assured product supply chain. And with that comes the capability to digitize human labor, to give the foundation for continuous improvement that is data-driven, fact-based, and sustainable. So I do actually believe that despite the humanity now is under one of the biggest crises in many, many years with pandemic and everything that has brought on sorrow and stress, I do believe that we as the global community will actually exit this stronger. It will take some time, but we will actually exit stronger and have learned much more from the challenges that we've faced now during the last one and a half year. So I will close by adding some words about what MTEK is doing in this case. So we are creating the factory intelligence system of today and tomorrow, and using all the manufacturing expertise that we've gained over the last 25 years on all the factory floors that we've visited globally. Everything comes down to my biggest key takeaway is that people are the same all over the world. We have the desire and everyone wants to collaborate. And when we now can bring people together, I do believe that the future is not nationalized or regionalized or globalized. It's actually digitized. And I believe that we are now entering into a very, very interesting future together where we can use the latest digital tools to bring society closer together. We also already see that with webinars such as this. So I thank you with that and hand over to you, Tehmina.
Thank you so much for that, Mattias. I think that was an excellent nutshell about everything that's been happening manufacturing sector-wise. And I can't help but agree with the fact that you say the future is definitely digitized, especially looking at how we're able to connect. Yourself in Sweden, some of us in Malaysia, some of us in Poland. I mean, it's global and it's inevitable. From
Yeah.
there, I love the fact that you frame not just the pain points, but how to actually overcome these challenges. Let's move into a couple of quick questions that I hope you're able to elaborate with us before we move into our next keynote speaker, shall we? So Mattias, what would you say is particularly when you look at the rapid digitization which has happened, but at the same time, what do you foresee about traditional or legacy manufacturing companies transitioning to smarter logistics? Because that will really be what separates them from the pack that gets ahead, right?
Yes, there's an old saying that change is not mandatory, or to change is not mandatory. Survival is also not mandatory. I think what we see now, specifically now, just the Suez Canal incident that happened a couple of weeks ago, this shows that we need to be much more aware of how we are transporting stuff. Logistics systems has to be connected. The entire supply chain must be connected. If you take one of the keywords of IoT, Internet of Things, is that things that deserves to be connected will be connected. And supply chain and logistics and smart factories, they needs because they deserve to be connected. So this is an activity that there's 13 by the dozen of companies that are providing such devices to be able to track logistics. But at the same time, I see that contextualized information becomes way more important. To understand where things are and why they are there, and what are the routes and the planned routes. Taking Suez Canal as an example.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Mattias. So from there, let's look into the opportunities which the pandemic has posed for the manufacturing industry. And have you actually seen much capitalization happening from these opportunities?
Yes, I spoke with one of the main telecom providers in the world just a couple of weeks ago. And he mentioned they have factories in I think 35 different factories globally. And one of the biggest benefit that he saw, and actually using the COVID situation as a big benefit in this case, and I do apologize for that, but what he mentioned to me was that this taught him that he doesn't need to send people to supervise prototype builds. So on every prototype build, he was used to send 10, 15, 20 people with the cost of each person traveling 10 to 15,000 US dollars. At the same time, by using digital tools for us, the ones that we are providing, the capability arises to actually create real-time visibility on those. Of course, you need to produce closer to the market. And I do believe that the digital maturity that we've actually gone through and been forced to apply is also running within the industry. Just look through companies that has managed to keep their manufacturing up and running, whereas most of the people or some of the people has been able to work from home and still performing the value creation to a certain level because they're connected. So this is a very interesting time right now to see what happens. Over to you, Tehmina.
Thank you, Mattias. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. While challenging, it's been an extremely interesting time, especially when it comes to manufacturing. And from there, how do you anticipate manufacturers may be able to stay prepared for future supply chain disruptions? I love that you actually made reference to the Suez Canal crisis right at the beginning. I mean, yes, of course, it captured our imagination, but in manufacturing terms, in terms of global trade, that was actually 12% of the total volume held up there at a rate of literally $9 billion a day. So yeah. a lot to chew on, a lot of food for thought.
Yes. No, and I think the COVID situation, the Suez Canal incident, is very recent. We're undergoing it right now. But I'd also see that the way that we have changed, the way that we are consuming stuff today, we expect to have next day delivery. The last mile delivery is one of the key things. We have all the fulfillment centers to have a combination of automation and digitalization that brings us the products tomorrow. 4 hours later, 2 days from now. And yet the supply chains of today is very much designed in a way that we have built them in a way that products has to be traveling on a boat for several months. And this, as I see, is a massive paradox. We can't continue to have that situation where we have a distributed supply chains without visibility. If we were capable to see when the Suez Canal incident happened and be able to, the companies that were able to understand where the products were and reroute them, still were able to supply to end customers. And I do believe that every of those disruptions that we see happening, because unfortunately the COVID-19 is not the last disruption that we will see, we need to learn from it. We need, as humanity, to understand what we can do better to prevent things, crisis like this to happen again. And also, we also become a very sensitive society, because if we don't get products or supply in time, we stop. What happens with all the shutdowns all around the globe, we see that when people are not able to get their food, their products, their necessities, we start having a crisis very soon. And I do believe that digitalization is the most important tool to help us predict that in the future and help us prevent that, most importantly.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Mattias. So from there, what would be some of your most practical advice, so to speak, when it comes to digitalization, especially for manufacturers who wish to actually retool their business strategy?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And now I'm very biased because we have the tools for this, and we have the tools for AI, we have neural networks, we have the capability to do short-term reinforced learning. The most important part of a digital journey is to start small and grow big, and always start with the human labor, always start with digitizing human labor. One of the key elements of this is we have so much creativity on the planet. We have so many people that comes to work in the day and does their utmost to make good products and provide a purpose. And by that as well, we are not taking care of the population, because the most important process knowledge that we have are working on the factory floors, producing the products. And by starting to digitizing their experience and the way they are doing the work and standard operating procedures, that is for us the key to have a sustainable continuous improvement. Because if we start with AI, of course, there's so many tools out there today that help us predict, that help us see what is about to happen. But at the same time, we miss the most simpler parts of how can we secure that this product is built in the best way? How can we secure that the experience of the operators and the engineers and the technicians are actually gathered in and reused, which is the foundation of continuous improvement. If we don't know where we start and we don't know where to go, we will not have continuous improvement. We will just have continuous change. And here comes the basis of digitalization. If we can simply digitize anything from, in my world, talking about manufacturing, the way that we put the screws in, the way that we have assembled the products, how, if there's variations in the product design, how can we use that information to help design a better product? So we, by that, continue to reduce waste. So it's start small and grow big. That's the key thing.
Great advice, definitely, especially when it comes to actually getting started rather than not doing anything at all and then being forced to perhaps pivot when the next crisis comes around. Yeah. Right. Mattias, then I also wanted to ask you about when it comes to manufacturing, at the same time, the more we digitize, the more we are vulnerable to the numerous cybersecurity incidents, which have also begun to impact IoT devices and solutions. What policies or regulations already in place are helping to reduce such risks, and thoughts on future solutions?
Well, this is one of the $1 million question, but I do believe that cybersecurity is always a threat, and it becomes more and more important to all of us. And one of the key things that we see is that using multi-factor authentication to make sure that device that speaks is not openly broadcasting to everyone. So not just to monitor devices on inbound traffic, to have all the firewalls and the techniques there, but also to make sure that we don't let the devices speak to everyone. So, and the cybersecurity is something that is of utmost importance. We see companies that are hammered on a daily basis. And once again, the society as a whole becomes more sensitive to this. So making sure that networks are air-gapped, making sure that devices are not openly broadcasting to internet, but to make sure that we have a good cybersecurity policy that we are always looking into and adhering to and updating. That's the key thing. It's at the same time as digitalization is an extraordinary opportunity, it also brings with it a lot of responsibility. We can't expose everything to everyone. At the same time, we need to create transparency on the right information. So it is a constant challenge, and it's a very good question, Tehmina.
Thank you for that lovely answer, Mattias. I think you make a point there about the fact that it's not just an investment, but a necessity if you do wish to move forward for digitization. Now, still on this digitization, Mattias, how does AI actually help upgrade manufacturers, especially considering what's been happening during COVID-19 and production SOPs that you've observed? Perhaps any global or even regional examples from your learnings that have proved to be very much informational?
Yes, and this is also a very good question. I was part of a panel several months ago, and I may or may not have been politically correct when I said let's not start with artificial intelligence. Let's start with normal intelligence first. And I would say that AI as such that's the next big thing, of course. And just throwing computer power off the numbers is a big benefit, and we can see a lot of information derived from that. At the same time, looking through the consumption patterns of us as consumers and the way they were producing, we simply don't have the luxury to have 2 years of data available. The product life cycles are becoming shorter and shorter. We're designing new products all the time. And of course, there's AI models that you can apply on certain levels, but at the same time, using the more short-term approach and reinforced learning approach, that will give us a lot more benefits than throwing just unsupervised learning after information that becomes biased in just a couple of months. And of course, the same thing goes with robotics. I think you usually say that variation is the biggest threat to quality. I would also say that variation is the biggest threat to automation and AI. And even though this is a bit of a paradox, because AI is helping us to visualize and correct variations and being able to predict when the variations comes. But on that topic, I would also say that you need to have the domain expertise within the field to apply AI to create a valuable information stream from it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mattias. It's been absolutely insightful. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately, we'll have to leave the other questions which have been rolling in from the participants for the later part of the session. Thanks so much, Mattias. We'll see you shortly.
Thank you.
So from there, everyone, we move into Maciej Golubierski, Head of Cabinet of Commissioner for Agriculture for the European Commission in Belgium. Mattias, the floor is now yours to share your thoughts on the agricultural sector, agri-tech, as well as the pandemic's unique opportunities for progress. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tehmina. I'm very glad to be at this WIEF-SIDC conference. Let me bring up my slides, as I also have a presentation prepared. Okay. All right. Indeed, the agricultural sector is also now struggling with the fundamental challenge of how to adapt to the post-pandemic situation, and it has been a real challenge. And let's talk maybe a little bit about the challenges that we've encountered as agricultural sector. And I'm speaking not as a practitioner, but as a I represent a regulatory body and a financial assistance body, right? So we try to provide a proper regulatory and financial environment for the sector that my Commissioner Kaoosji, is in charge of. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges of the pandemic as the kind of the way to learn from them, looking into the future. Then I'll talk a little bit about the overarching policy that we've embarked on, called the Farm to Fork strategy, which covers the whole supply chain, not just production, but everything from production to consumer side. And then we'll talk about the solutions in the digitization sphere, and a little bit about, because this is really where durability and sustainability comes in, is how to ensure that agriculture exists in generations to come. So we need to talk about the youth a little bit, and attracting youth to agriculture. Going with the challenges. The main challenges in the EU at the start of the pandemic was definitely the sudden closure of the whole sector of food services, meaning hotels, cafes, restaurants, canteens, the so-called HoReCa sector. The disruption that happened to the movements of goods and workers within the EU internal market that were following through from it were quite sizable. So we have to understand that agricultural producers very much rely on seasonal and cross-border workers, for example, in going about their work. This also was a big challenge. While the EU is an internal market, there were some measures that member states took to close temporarily borders. There were some bottlenecks, and I'll talk about transport a bit more maybe later. But the whole supply chain bottleneck idea, the fact that over 3 billion tons of agricultural products are being moved around in the EU in any given year, create a situation when not just with the closure of one of the subsectors, meaning the HoReCa, but also the fact that the food could not go around was a big challenge. And on top of that, the seasonal worker problem, where human labor basically was not where it's supposed to be. So that mainly affected vegetable and fruit producers and slaughtering plants and those types of establishments. Also, wine producers were hit very hard. High quality meats, beef producers, these were all producers that supplied the restaurants, for example. Now, agricultural producer organizations are an important part of the EU's agricultural sector. Many of these producer organizations also carry out some processing activities and were also affected by the disruptions brought about by COVID. These issues luckily were resolved relatively quickly, including by interventions at the EU level, at our level, to unblock those bottlenecks and allow supply chains to operate more efficiently. And when you look at consumer prices in the aftermath, we see that pretty much they came back to the levels, normal levels that I guess since July last year. I think we're talking about the evening out of the prices. So we are back to kind of the normal. Now, some of the successes that we can talk about during that period also had to do with how farmers and other supply chain operators cooperated to find solutions. So we had, for example, we had some supermarkets and local producers who worked to redirect specialty products normally sold in restaurants to supermarkets. We had, as I mentioned before, the producer organizations. They also played a pivotal role in providing information to producers and allowing them to adjust to the impact of the crisis. There was a processing plant, just one example, that was unable to find packaging materials, but coordinated with contacts across the border in other member states to package the goods there and avoid food waste that way. So there was this need for flexibility, which was exercised. There was a need for communication, building positive relationships, and cooperating with other operators to kind of turn those challenges into successes in the times of crisis, which I think goes into what my predecessor said, that the more connected you were at that time, the better you dealt with the crisis. Now, how to ensure resilience and look more towards sustainable future. The EU food already is a sustainable, well, at least it's a standard for global safety when it comes to food and its quality. But we also need to transition to the sustainable food system. What does that mean? we need to make sure that not only that the whole food system is resilient to economic shocks and exogenous shocks, but also that it's sustainable in terms of nutrition, in terms of health, in terms of consumer preferences that are constantly evolving. So we need to adopt farmers for the future, help them adapt to for example, to climate change, to take care of the environment. So this is where we are going also into the future, where resilience is linked very closely to sustainability. And this is where we come to the farm to fork idea, which is basically a policy strategy adopted last May. This strategy is not a purely an agricultural policy, but it's kind of a vision to transform the way we produce across the board, distributed consumer food, and to improve our health and our environment. So we believe that this strategy, farm to fork strategy, is an opportunity to reset the course towards even greener and more sustainable future. And basically, this requires efforts across all points along the supply chain. So the goals are, and you see it on the slide, we want to reduce environmental and climate footprint of the EU food system. We want to strengthen its resilience. Obviously, we want to ensure food security, which is obviously a separate issue, but very much linked to resilience. And we have increasing needs in terms of growing population, but also we have climate change and biodiversity loss, which also impact in the long term food production. And we want to lead a global transition towards competitive, as we call it, sustainability around the world. Now, what are some of the kind of operational targets? I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are some of them. They're quite radical in their ambition. Obviously, each member state has a slightly different approach and slightly different starting point. So it's not kind of one size fits all, but we really want to reduce the use and risk of chemical pesticides by 2030 by 50%. Nutrient losses, we sometimes go overboard when we try to increase our yields, and then this then creates nitrogen pollution and things like that. So we need to again use technology to reduce those nutrient losses. Again, our ambition is by at least 50%. Antimicrobial use is also a problem. It's a little bit too much used of that. We also want to reduce it by 50, and then also we want to promote organic farming as a kind of a way to the future. Now, I want to talk a little bit about digitization, because I think this is where the kind of agri-tech and technology comes in, and this is where operators and in technology and producers really can look to step in. The COVID-19 pandemic has revealed how crucial digital technologies are. When I was talking about the initial challenges during the COVID, it was the farmers who suddenly found themselves with, lost markets, with problems with their supply chains. They went to the internet. A lot of them went to the internet market, so to speak, to try to market more directly, closer to the consumer, their produce, their products, and whatever they produced. So digitization obviously is very high on the Commission's agenda. We've developed a whole policy framework around digitization. This also will help to fulfill our ambitions under Farm to Fork. We believe that digitization will strengthen the competitiveness of the sector and also contribute, as I said, to the sustainability-related objectives. It's self-explanatory. Digitization will increase resilience. I don't have to kind of talk too much about this obvious fact. But also it will enable farmers to work a bit more precisely, a bit more efficiently, sustainably. So it also will allow to have consumers the consumers will have more transparency as to how their food is produced, what it is, what it consists of. So digital technologies, and I think my predecessor talked about visibility. This is also important in agriculture. Digital technologies for farmers will enable them to assess more easily production environmental conditions through various innovations like sensors. They can tailor, let's say, applying fertilizers or irrigation techniques more precisely. That way they can reduce their emissions or inputs of those fertilizers. The agro-robotics can support the production processes. for example, through weeding and things like that. This is all quite forward-looking, and I think digital technologies cut across the board, across all agricultural space, from kind of conventional farming, but also vertical farming, large, small house holdings, etc. So we have also special programs in research and innovation to promote data technologies among farmers, and we believe that we are overdue with digital transformation of the agricultural sectors, and here we provide support. So we fund actions that boost innovation in agriculture, and if you're interested, we have a program called Horizon 2020. It's a funding program where partners, and I give you one example, so partners from Italy, for example, 150 partners play a key role. I invite you to follow the results of this project called Smart Agri Hubs. You can find it on the internet. There's also a project called Internet of Food and Farm. These are interventions in the ballpark sum of 20 to 30 million euro, and they are basically created to boost digitization along various parts of the agri-value food chain, but work with actual farmers, taking into account business realities. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the vertical urban farming, because I know it's something important as a topic for you. Obviously, 40% of European cities live in cities. Societies have become more urbanized, and they also want to feel closer to their food. We talked a little bit about the need for shorter supply chains given the transport bottlenecks, and the need for them kind of became more urgent during the COVID-19 outbreak. So the urban farming idea, in some sense, corresponds to that need, especially also in countries and regions where there is maybe a problem with land supply. Land supply for farming varies geographically widely. South Asia has more of a problem than Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, where there is plenty of land, but at the same time there are other issues that inhibit more efficient farming. But we need to put a lot of effort into more research into urban farming and how to get this started. But we do have, again, within this Horizon 2020, which started in November, we have a project called the European Forum for a Comprehensive Vision of Urban Agriculture, and it will try to bring all those dimensions of urban farming together around the research and innovation agenda, and we're working on those ideas as well. So the pandemic obviously revealed again that digitization and access to the internet and general digital technology plays a huge part in building resilience in the farming sector. We also need to make sure that we have educated farmers and consumers, and I think digital technologies can also they also need to be properly introduced. So we are also trying to help farmers through various initiatives in terms of how to ensure that the uptake of technologies is proper. And really, there's a problem. Some farmers, especially those who have smaller households, maybe not necessarily very tech savvy, need more assistance in understanding how technology works and how it can help them. So capacity building obviously is a huge issue. Also, not everything is self-explanatory, and some of those things are very new. Now, coming to a close, I want to talk a little bit about the generational renewal. This is a topic very close to Commissioner's heart. If we want to have a future of farming, we need to have farmers, and we have a problem in Europe, and I think in many other places, that farming, especially more traditional farming, is not attractive to the young generation. And what we have, there's a statistics that farm managers below 35 years of age constitute only about 5% of all farms in the EU, which is, not my predecessor talked about demography, and demography in rural areas is not very positive. So if we do not manage to support the youth to make a decent living through farming, we will lose on multiple fronts. So the youth has a key role to play in the transition to a sustainable and innovative agriculture. and holding the key to attract more young people to agriculture. We need to lead by example, and I think this is why our agricultural policy, which goes under the name Common Agricultural Policy, this is the kind of what we are in charge of. With my commissioner is in charge of this so-called the CAP, Common Agricultural Policy. This is why the generational renewal is such a huge priority, also in this particular financing perspective until 2027. The CAP, this policy that we promulgate, already had a positive effect on investing in generational renewal. We have programs that are targeted at young farmers. We, for example, target, help them set up, give them subsidies to set up support to farming activities. We support training and knowledge transfer actions. We offer some diversification opportunities if the farmers want to move into some other areas and in terms of from one mono activity to more diverse production. Also we promote broadband applications and investments in broadband. So this all has the objective to make rural areas more attractive places to live and work for younger people and for everyone else who lives in the rural areas. So for the future, I believe that we have put forward a policy framework for the Common Agricultural Policy, which is flexible enough to support different needs of young farmers. And obviously this is our policy priority. So in a nutshell, this is where we see where we should go in terms of promoting resilience and where those key areas are. But I think this lesson of understanding that suddenly we can be hit with an exogenous shock that really disturbs everything from production all the way to the consumer side, gave us a pause, gave us a lot of thought in agriculture as well, how we can ensure that we can be somehow shielded a little bit more from that. And I think digitization here is key. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mattias. I think that was a really good and strong overall perspective on agriculture, especially from an EU perspective. Now, before we move along, maybe please proceed into a couple of questions. Mattias, I wanted to ask you about the opportunities which the pandemic has posed for the agricultural industry and whether you've seen capitalization happening, particularly within the EU region, from these opportunities.
Thank you. I think, when I talked about how we emerged from the challenges and what the challenges were, that automatically shows us where the opportunities are. And I want to come back to this issue of short-term production chains. I mean, we have in Europe a situation where, let's say, pigs are produced in one country. Let's say let's say they are born in Denmark, but they have to be transported to Poland to be fattened, then travel another 1,000 kilometers back to Denmark to be slaughtered, etc. There is 3 billion tons of food being transported. So the opportunity here is to ensure that we can somehow either rationalize a little bit our supply chains, make them shorter, or maybe connected to the local markets a bit more. And I think this is where, I don't know about capitalization and exact, what is going on now in the market in terms of innovation, but I think going to the realization that farmers have had and SMEs in the farming environment, that they need to develop the means for the farmers to deliver to the local markets better, and through more direct marketing, through more use of internet, is really something where there are tons of opportunities. For example, processing often happens in faraway places. Farmers produce primary products, but they have to sell them to the large intermediaries. The local markets, oftentimes are weakening. We don't have processing plants around, kind of a lot of farm holdings. So I would imagine that there will be a push to also maybe vertically integrate a little bit the primary production through also digitization and internet. So these are some of the elements that accompany the realization that shorter production chains are necessary more and more, while obviously keeping open to the world trade. And I'm not talking about autarkic closing in, but trying to see if we can get more local production here. So that's I think the opportunity that we see.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mattias. I think you make a great point there about the importance of shortening the supply chains, because that also directly correlates to the food security and also ensuring that farm to fork is something that is adopted almost organically for the wider perspective. From there, Mattias, now, would you say that agri-tech during COVID-19 has actually lived up to the hype and helped farmers rise above the pandemic, in the EU at least?
I mean, I talked a little bit about this. I mean, the hype, it's a necessity. I mean, digitalization of the agriculture sector is necessary to well, to address the long-term sustainability of the sector, and then obviously its resilience. So whether it has lived up to the hype, obviously the kind of the more obvious technological solutions like the internet applications, internet platforms, and things of that sort obviously lived up to their promise and to their function, because they did provide alternatives for alternative outlets for selling products. But when it comes to more precise digital technologies and kind of the agri-tech, as you call it, I mean, in terms of production, I'm sure there was those who had access to this technology probably used it maybe to save on some of the inputs. Let's say that maybe were not easily sourced at the time of the initial bottlenecks. But I think we all agree that digital technologies do and will transform agriculture, and this is a necessity. So yeah, I mean, I think at least the pandemic made most farmers realize that they have to be a bit more attuned to the digital and technological needs of the sector.
Thank you, Mattias. And now one last question, perhaps, speaking about, of course, generational renewal, when it comes to encouraging more youths to actually get started in the agri-tech sector, perhaps, what sort of capital do they actually need? And where does that capital, at least in the EU, come from, perhaps as an example for similar models which could be adopted in Southeast Asia or even ASEAN?
In terms of the youths?
That's right.
In terms of, yeah, well, we have the common agriculture policy, obviously, and the common agriculture policy, it's one of its kind of elements is promoting generation renewal and helping the youths. So in general, we have a lot of instruments. We're talking about, I'll give you the figure. We're talking about 2.8, let's see, for 2020, we're talking about 2.8 billion euros of the funding budget for all sorts of interventions. So we have the money now. In terms of the particular programs, there's called the Rural Development Program, which is the program within this policy called the CAP, which helps young farmers to set up their business. But I also want to talk a little bit about the new instruments that are now present in Europe. You probably read it in the press, so-called Next Generation EU, which is basically EU borrowing on the international market to help with the post-pandemic situation, crisis. It's 750 billion of kind of money that will be sourced in the international markets, partly by borrowing, but then it will be given out in grants or in loans. This is a temporary instrument, but it also will help farmers fund some of the digital investments and investments that help young farmers and other farmers, obviously, to kind of emerge from the crisis. So we have specific facilities, financial facilities in the EU that are attuned to this. We need to understand that the banking system that we have needs to play a better role to assist young farmers. We need to find ways to better access financing through local banks. We in countries especially which do not have very developed capital markets, and this is also the ambition of the new CAP. So yeah, there's a lot, and I mentioned a little bit about the technology transfer and the need for education. So there's also a lot of financing going into ensuring that the digital technologies that already exist, and there are many, are being properly taken up by those who need them most. So this is some of the instruments and things that we're working towards.
Thank you so much, Maciej. I think that was a great overview, especially about why exactly EU's agricultural sector has stayed remarkably resilient. Thank you so much for those explanations. We will, of course, come back to getting a couple of questions from the audiences, which have been coming in for yourself towards the end of the session.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on into our last presentation from one of our keynote speakers for the day. I'd now like to invite Yang Berbahagia, Dato' Kamarul Rizwan Muhammad, to present his thoughts on the outlook for the oil and gas sectors during the pandemic. Dato', the floor is all yours.
Hey, Tehmina, glad to be here. Hello, everybody. Let me try to share the slide first.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So again, I just want to say thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored to have a distinguished speaker, and I saw the chairman of WIEF also is here as well. So I'm honored to be with all of you here. Let me, the purpose of this presentation is to share our 21 years of journey going through boom and bust of oil and gas industry. As everybody know, oil and gas has been a very cyclical type of nature, but the last 6 years has been very, what you call, painful to many of industry player. And I want to share with you how, what do you call this, how do we go through this cyclical nature of a business and remain relevant throughout this process, okay? At the end of the day, I will try to conclude what does OGSE, the Oil and Gas Service and Equipment Company, required at the moment to further move forward into the future, okay? But before I go there, let me just quickly say that every business requires three things, okay? Every business requires growth, every business requires profit, and they require performance sustainability, okay? I mean, this is almost the same for every industry, for everybody. I mean, there is going to be some exception to the rules, but what we need here is we need all the three businesses. It's almost like a trinity for any businesses, okay? But balancing these three is very important if you go through the cyclical type of business. Okay? There is a time that you want to have more growth. There's time that you want to have more profit. Then there's time that you want to always have the sustainability. Okay? So balancing this is very, very important. And unfortunately, is not something that easily can be done. Okay? So just want to set the scene. That's the first thing that every businesses would be looking. Okay? The next one, I'm just going to give a bit of a brief history about oil and gas market for the last almost 150 years. Okay, in reality, the first 100 years, the oil price has been pretty consistent. Okay, from 1870s to 1970s, the oil price relatively been consistent. Okay, that's why a lot of people think that oil and gas business is very stable business. But in 1973, the oil crisis came. This is Iran and US revolution came in. In 1979, 1980, we start to see the energy crisis and oil gluts. We see the OPECs flooding the market to bring down the price. Okay, in 1985, OPECs again doing it again just to make sure that they bring down the price again. Okay. And in 2000, we see a global recession, okay? And 2008, we saw the financial crisis. And then from 2014 to 2020 has been an extremely volatile business, okay? 2014, we see the shale revolution, where US suddenly become the world's largest oil producer. They become quickly, using the technology that they develop, quickly become the world producer, no longer depending on oil from Middle East. And 2016, it become lower for longer when everybody produce at will. Okay, Saudi Arabia is producing, Russia producing, US is producing, so we are flooding the market. Okay, And I think the pain is too painful for everybody to bear. So in 2018, finally, OPEC Plus and Russia decided to work together and cut our production. So they finally managed to bring the price up in 2018. But it's pretty much short-lived. Suddenly the COVID-19 came, okay? And like any disasters, the good thing about disasters, there's only one good thing about disasters, is normally it ends very quickly, okay? You have flood, you have forest fire, it normally lasts not more than a month. The effect is probably longer, but it normally ends very quickly. Unfortunately, with the COVID-19, this is unprecedented. We've never seen it before. It lasts longer than what we anticipated, and it's pretty much obliterate everything that's gone through their ways, okay? So the last 6 years has been a very, very difficult situation, difficult time for every oil and gas players who are participating in the industries, okay? Going back closer to home, USMA was established in 2000. So we actually seen quite a bit of cyclical nature of this business, okay? So when I finished setting up the scene, I thought that I'm just going to give you some ideas. A lot of people think oil and gas industry is for lack of a better word, a sexy industry, is a lot of money. But in reality, since 2005 to 2019, the industry has bring a very little returns to the shareholders, okay? The oil service company, especially people like ourselves, like USMA, we have seen the contraction in the total annual returns to shareholders. And this is not just Malaysia alone, this is happening globally, okay? So the oil industry does face a serious what you call this crunch at this point in time. And it is require a structure change on how, if you want to remain relevant, okay? This isn't just another slide, it's just to show the EBITDA CAGR for the OGSE from 1991 to 2019, okay? In the last 6 years, we've seen the contraction of nearly 17%, okay? Remember, I mentioned about that we need profit, we need growth, and we need to be sustainable. Unfortunately, these numbers shows that there is little profit, there's very low growth, and the company many companies struggle to survive, okay? So again, how do you break through this issue? How do you remain relevant over a period of time, okay? So let me bring back to the history of USMA. Okay, company set up in 2000. The first 8 years of our existence, we are growing very, very rapidly. But this growth is fueled by the demands of the hungers of China and India for hydrocarbons. Okay, so with that, we provide services around the world. USMA work in more than 36 countries with 50 plus customer around the world, and that has propelled our growth. But that's pretty much what you call this as the growth is due to the demand. Okay, comes 2007 and 2008, there was a global financial crisis. Okay, so back then we already say we need to change. If we don't change, there's something bad gonna happen. Okay, so what we did by then is we decided to focus on technology. Okay, we decided really, if we want to move forward on this one, we really have to focus on technology. So we went out and then we acquired a lot of technology, either from Russia, from UK, Canada, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines. We bought fewer companies and put it together, bring their technologies and provide the solution to our customers, okay? And that has propelled our growth during that period of time, yeah? The ability for us to adapt at that time has make us survive going through the financial crisis in 2007 and 2008. And then it comes the great uncertainties time, which is 2016 to until now. We noticed that since 2014, there is the oil price already artificially high. We know it will come crashing down. So we decided to come up with our own plan. Okay, in 2018, we launched our 5-year plan. Essentially, that's to diversify the business, not only within the oil and gas life of the field, but also outside oil and gas. And I think the plan was doing very well until the small little germs comes in, and then a virus comes in, and then obliterate everybody. So we have to revise our what do you call this, our 5 years plan, and we relaunch our 5 years plan in 2020. All right. Essentially, what this tells us at this point in time is we feel that everybody need to quickly adapt, knowing that these are the business that you are in. You are in the cyclical business, okay? But what is actually become a bit more difficult is in the last 6 years, actually, you don't really have time. When you drop, you wake, you come out, you drop again. And so there is no breather between one cycle to another, okay? And this is manifest by the numbers that we saw earlier on, okay? So we have really very little choice, but as to diversify, okay? So what we did here, we feel that how do we respond to this, okay? How do we respond? Our response plan is to reset, okay? We just feel, okay, look, we need to stop and then start thinking about this. So what we did, maybe for many of you, reset probably means that pressing the, what you call it, on-off button. But for baby boomers and people like myself, resets mean pressing Control, Alternate, Delete, okay? And this is for people that use IBM back then, when you have a computer hang, then you have to press Control, Alternate, Delete to reset it, okay? So this is exactly what we did, okay? We decided to control certain things, especially our expenditure. We also decided to control our growth. We have been, our CAGR is one of the most highest CAGR in the country, okay? But we decided that we cannot continue like this, okay? Because it will eat up our capital, it will eat up our cash flow. So we have to control our growth as well. Besides that, we decided that we have to go and look for alternative income, okay? We decided to be in the renewable energy, cleaner energy, which is easier transition from energy business, from oil and gas to cleaner energy. We also decided to be in digitalization. Digitalization is not something new, but it has been used for many, many years. But it was used internally to improve our efficiencies and then replace some mundane work with robotic process system. But we decided to commercialize some of this technology as well. On top of that, we also decided to delete certain things. We delete inefficiency, again, by going digital. We also want to focus a bit more, okay? So what we did back then, we say, okay, number one, let's create what we call a cost leadership program. So we want to look at how can we preserve our cash. We look into a short-term, medium-term, and the long-term scenarios. We come up with a certain plans, for example, cost deflation, cash preservation, how do we go efficiency versus digitalization. We go into simplifications, meaning that sometimes we just design once but can build multiple times, okay? So we have a simple standards instead of using very high standard that meant for North Sea, okay? So we go back to the basics, basically. We say, look, we need to come up with a fit for purpose technology so that we can become the cost leader in our industry. We also start looking at all the investment that we have done in the last 20 years in terms of buying, merger, acquisitions. And we say in the past, it was almost like a investment kind of a position. But this time we want to become a strategic, what you call this acquisition. So we pull everybody back together. We try to reduce what you call duplications. And so far, we have seen a lot of improvement in terms of that. We also have a lot of assets, and we slowly monitoring our asset in more, what you call more detail. And that has helped a lot in terms of bringing the controlling our costs. When it comes to alternative income, we diversify into non-oil and gas. I will talk a bit more about that later. Okay, the transitions to non-oil and gas is very critical for us. We set certain target, and we are very aggressive about that target as well. Okay. On top of that, we also expand into peripheral business, for example, into gas and LNG. We completely believe and subscribe into energy transitions. We believe gas is the right transition energy. Gas is 90 years old energy, okay? So it has been very resilient. Only recently we've been able to transport the gas via LNG, via seaborne, okay? But there is a lot of opportunities that has not been captured because this is relatively still new energy. So we're moving into that. We work with the regulator, we work with the government to get all the licenses to get involved in certain R&Ds, to involve in the gas and LNG downstreams as well. When it comes to oil and gas business, you should never leave your main coffer, okay? Because this is the one that drives us. So we thought that we need to be more resilient with this business, okay? How do we do that? We are going a bit more regional. When we first set up 21 years ago, USMA is actually not a Malaysian company. We started overseas. And by the time in 2008, when we went public, it's about 50% of our business actually generated overseas. But over a period of years, because of our footprint mainly in Malaysia, our business mainly over here. But we are trying to go regional. So we set up a footprint regionally and also in Middle East as well, okay? And then lastly, we look at what can we delete from our business. So we rationalize non-performing services. We look at whether it's integrated into our horizontal and vertically. If it doesn't, we quickly divest. Even some of the business that bring us profit, we actually divest because if it's not strategic, okay. We also remove inefficiency by going digital. I think Mattias mentioned about go for the lower hanging fruits, and that's what exactly we did. Okay, we don't go for something complicated. We don't go with a neural network just yet. We go something very simple first. We automate the process, and hopefully that will bring the fruit so that it become start small, go big later on. That's how we believe when it comes to digitalizations. Okay, so all this comes to, if we want to summarize this, there is two strategic themes to drive the companies forward, okay? For us, our oil and gas has to remain as our core business. This is what our expertise is. That's how we build our strength, our brand. But we need to increase resiliencies and operate differently. We probably need to be paid based on the performance rather than paid by time. Okay, so we are building the different key changes in terms of how we bring the business into USMA. In terms of non-oil and gas, it will be our growth strategy. This need to be moving very fast. We are very aggressive. Our target is non-oil and gas will contribute 40% of our top line within 5 years. Okay, so it's a very aggressive, but we think that it can be achieved because there is the climates allow that, the environments want that. People are moving towards renewable energy. People know that we cannot have inefficiency anymore, so that's people want to have the digitalization. So that's what we are doing. Okay, so in a nutshell, what we're looking at is that we say that we're going to increase. This is our 5 years, what do you call it, 5 years plan. Number one, we want to increase the resiliencies in our oil and gas business. Okay? And I already mentioned this. Okay, but we also want to accelerate diversification beyond oil and gas. This has to be through merger acquisitions and aggressive participation in the not only in Malaysia but regionally and around the world as well. At the end of the day, our portfolio will become 60-40 by 2025. So there's a big change. We are currently about 90-10 currently. So it's a huge change moving forward. And in terms of oil and gas, we believe that because oil and gas life of field is begin from looking at the basin, explorations, what do you call the development, production, abandonment, treat, refine. So we want to go throughout the life of the fields. We are very much upstream, pretty much a brownfield player. So because of this cyclical nature of business, we feel that there is a need for us to go down into the life of a field. Typically, when the upstream is down, downstream is up. Okay, and that is a typical nature. So we believe that there is a natural balancing act. So we need to have both upstream and downstream. Okay, we also, as I said, we want to go beyond Malaysia, and we set a target of 30%. And then we set a target that the recurring and versus non-recurring business will become what you call project-based will be 40%, and then recurring becomes 60%. Okay. For non-oil and gas, we are very focused on three things. We want to be in the renewables and the clean energy. We call it the new energy. We have been very successful in recent months. We have secured close to 100 megawatts of solar work, and be it the developers and also as EPC contractors. Okay. We have been working very hard in terms of doing LNG business in Malaysia. We have been awarded the rights to bring in the LNG. We believe that LNG is important as a energy transition. So, okay, before everything goes into renewables, gas will be a good alternative. Okay. We also want to be in digitalizations and aerospace. We believe the aerospace will help every industry make a better decision. This is through using the digital images to make their key decision making. Okay. So overall, I would say that for any company, we need to be able to adapt. Okay. I guess Darwin did say it's not the strongest species nor the most intelligent that survive, but the most adaptable that adaptable to change will survive. And I think that's we believe that strongly, and so it's important for any company to be able to adapt very quickly. The second thing is I believe it is important for the management and for the whole organization to believe that it's not profit all the time, and it's not growth all the time, and it's not about sustainability all the time. You need to be able to balance it depending on the situation and the what is facing you at this point in time. And I believe also there is three levers that you have. You have a control, alternate, delete to balance this profit growth and sustainability. And this is what we have been doing for the last 21 years. It's also bring the opportunity for us to collaborate. Okay. This pandemic, the few downturn in the very quick spate of a downturn in the last few years has opened up opportunity to collaborate, and not only with the service between service company among service company, but service company with the operators, with the regulators, with the government, even with the rivals. Okay, and we've seen this is happening, and I hope there is more collaboration coming in the future as well. Okay, and last, we need to have a long-term vision. I mean, the world need our help. I believe that we all subscribe to Paris Agreement, okay, COP21. So we all have to have a long-term vision, and if you have a long-term vision looking into this, you need to plan your business accordingly as well. So that's all, Tehmina, that I have, and I'm more than happy to answer if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Dato. That was a super insightful presentation, wide-ranging yet extremely concise. I do have a couple of questions before we bring on our other esteemed speakers to join you, so we can answer all the audience questions that have been rolling in. The first question I had for you, Dato, was, so what opportunities do you see the pandemic has posed for the oil and gas industry, and do you actually see capitalization from these opportunities, especially when it comes to other players in the field?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, what I see is the opportunity to reset. Okay, people has been talking about we need to go into renewables. We need to get into what you call this compliance to Paris agreements, but nobody actually doing it in for real. This demand disruptions and then what you call this pandemics has created the necessity for people to actually to reset and say, look, we need to do this. I mean, we saw Petronas president announced about net carbon zero. I mean, this has been capitalized. Okay, we see, for example, USMA itself is we are focused more on building more resilient business, exploring into renewables energy. Okay. As a matter of fact, what we've seen in the last 12 months make us more serious about ESGs as well. We start looking into SRI fundings, For example, right now, we also measure every greenhouse gas that we release, so that we are trying to become really, what do you call this, a responsible organization as well. But this, there is other things that what do you call this, I see as an opportunity. The opportunity is opportunity to collaborate. I mentioned it earlier on, okay? And also opportunity to consolidate. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to see any consolidations in any recent years. That's a bit unfortunate. Okay.
That's right. Thank you for that, Dato. Definitely, there's still a lot of opportunity, as you did observe, especially when it comes to capitalization. From there, I'd like to also ask you, when it comes to digital transformation, particularly because this is a sector that USMA has been specializing in for the past couple of years, what are the major challenges for the oil and gas industry, and what are some of the solutions that you would recommend?
It's a very good question. I mean, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but oil and gas, to a certain extent, are not ready for digitalization like most other industries. Number one, the data is the gold mine for the oil industries. Okay, we believe that the data is our properties. So to make sure that digitalization works very well, you need to liberalize the data. Okay, and that is a bit difficult in oil and gas, and I still see that is as a constraint. Okay, having said that, there is a low-hanging fruits that we can do that doesn't really related to reservoir data. For example, I can say, for example, the operation and maintenance, predictive maintenance, predictive failures, all those things. People are working on that one. People are already working on the, what you call this, digital twins. But there is also pose another question: does infrastructure is ready for that? Okay, and in Malaysia, for example, we are operating a few hundred kilometers away offshore. Okay, there is not enough bandwidth for us to do a proper digital twins. Okay, so this infrastructure change need to be ready first before we do that. But having said that, there's plenty of low-hanging fruits. Okay, I mean, people are using drones to solve some of those issues. We are using AI to look at some of the core data to predict some of fishes that while we are drilling. So there is opportunity there. But if I want to say one thing, there is the people are not built for digitalization in oil and gas, and there is a required solution to that, and that means that we need to transform some of our people, what do you call this, to be able to train into the digitalizations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dato. I think that was very insightful, candid, but nevertheless, that is the entire idea of how we can move forth all the industrial sectors, particularly oil and gas, with digitalization. Thank you so much for your presentation, Dato. And at this point in time, we're now able to transition finally into answering all the audience questions which we have been receiving throughout the speaker sessions by our esteemed keynote speakers. Gentlemen, may I welcome each one of you back to join us on the panel, Mattias as well as Mattias to join Dato Kumaro. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us as well, once again. Now, from there, let's move on into, as we draw towards the close of our Power Talk session, taking in the audience questions. So what I have here right now is the very first one posed by Vicky Yip, and she has a question for Mattias. Vicky asked, what is the future for Industry 4.0 in the post-COVID-19 paradigm, and what role does it have to play moving forward?
Well, I would say it has a very, very important role moving forward. Just referring to what Mr. Dato said and Mr. Mattias said, we're in the same situation. Industry 4.0 being the smart industry and the smart factory. It's all about understanding and creating visibility throughout supply chain, being able to take the right decisions, being able to predict the process outcome, and being able to move forward and close gaps in between factories or production locations, if we take the same thing of AgTech, just take the right decision. So Industry 4.0 is extremely important.
Absolutely. Take the decisions and take them in time as well. Thank you, Mattias. Now, another question from Hassan Abbas, and he's actually asking all our panelists, but perhaps I will direct this to Mattias first. Hassan is asking, how do we inspire youth to take up farming?
It's a very good question, and this is a million-dollar question, and this is a priority for our commissioner and for our policy. First of all, we need to do something about reviving the rural areas and make them attractive to live in. I think there's been this, well, people come to the cities looking for opportunities. And I think without creating opportunities in the rural areas, the youth continue to look for opportunities elsewhere. So we have a long-term vision for rural areas, which is another strategy paper, like the right strategies, obviously, as policymakers. But through digitization, broadband use, possibly promotion of 5G, etc., and also many others, general economic development projects. I mean, we would like to make rural areas attractive to farmers, which were in the rural areas in the first place. Second, I think there's the evolution of preference. The farmers are also consumers, and they evolve with society. So if we don't get the youth farmer, so to speak, interested in producing more sustainably, because this is what's considered now kind of almost a cultural necessity, then the young farmers will not feel compelled to engage in what is considered as an unattractive type of activity, which is a traditional farming. And I'm talking about not what I believe in, but what the perception of in times in Europe is. Second thing is profitability. It's very, very simple. To be a competitive and profitable farmer, you need more and more inputs. You need more and more acreage. You need more and more. So the margins are thin. So here, obviously, is a whole idea of startup support. We do have programs, investment programs, loan programs, grant programs that somehow target young farmers to develop interesting business models on their farms, maybe in the direction of more advanced technologies, more advanced farming, or something that will also be attractive from the kind of a human capital point of view. So yes, I mean, so it's a mixture of obviously profitability. You need to be profitable. You need to if you want to make a living of farming, you need to have the means. So that's a big one. But also more kind of a cultural and sustainable factors that we try to promote.
Yeah.
Absolutely, cultural as well as sustainability, because that would play the key, particularly in attracting youth. But of course, the intersection of technology does play a huge role. I'll come back to that in just a while, Mattias. But now I've got a question for Dato Kamarul. Another question from Hassan Abbas, who's asking, should companies make a radical shift towards renewables and away from oil and gas?
I don't think so. My personal view is even in the most what do you call aggressive models that run by various BP's statistical review, McKinsey's and all that, the oil and gas will remain what do you call the formidable force for the source of energy for foreseeable futures. Okay, but I do believe that we need to look at how can we contribute for the cleaner energy. Okay. I would like to say that carbon captures, utilization and storage, CCUS, has been in the talk for many years, but there is not much action into that. Okay, USMA, for example, we invested in the joint industry programs together with the University of Technology Petronas Research and Harry Ward University to look into best in class model on how to do the carbon captures. Okay. And we completed a couple of years ago, so we have pretty good experience into this. And I know there's a lot of research ongoing. There's a lot of projects ongoing about CCUS as well. So So I do believe that hydrocarbon will be still a big source of energy, at least for another 30, 40 years. Okay, and this is been corroborated by other research report as well. So to answer your question is, do we need to go fully into that? I'm not quite sure, but I believe that we need to transition into this because it will happen. The oil peak probably have reached, or if it's not, will be very soon. Okay, and because of that, we need to plan for the future. Yeah.
Absolutely. Future planning as well as future proofing. Thank you, Dato. From there, I have a question for Mattias. Speaking about the trend for manufacturing firms around the world where they've currently been accelerating investments in disruptive digital technology, AI, robotics, cloud platform, what have you. But do you feel that this will persist post-pandemic? And why or why not? And in your opinion, what should be the trend?
Yeah, definitely. And I would like to add as well to the previous question regarding how do we attract youth. We are in a situation where we are adopting extremely fast. As once again, the digital maturity of us as individuals and us as companies is exploding. The adoption to these tools have now been understood that it's a necessity to survive and to continue to be competitive. And if we can also find a workplace, and to the point of being in a rural area, MTEK is now, we're located 3 hours north of Stockholm in the middle of the forest. It's 2.5 hours to the nearest airport. And we still manage to build a very high-tech company here in the middle of the forest. And the way that we do that is that we collaborate closely with the schools and down to kids in the years of 6, 7 years of age to understand where is the future of manufacturing. How can we create a workplace that is creative, that is rewarding, and that is value creating in every step that we do. And then here comes those tools that we all on this panel has been talking about. And the adoption rate of these digital tools is, I see, as the key thing for the future capability to provide safe foods, good products, and clean energy and real good, efficient energy to all of us. So it's extremely important.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Mattias. So from there, I have another question for Mathieu, which is from Hassan Abbas, who's asking, could urban agriculture reduce a city's carbon footprint? Your thoughts on this?
Well, urban farming, as far as we see it in the Commission, as I also mentioned in my presentation, is a new venture, is a kind of a bit of an experiment, which obviously holds potentially a lot of promise. But I think we need to first assess, and as I said, we have this European Forum for a Comprehensive Vision of Urban Agriculture that brings the researchers and stakeholders together to see how to approach it through R&I investments, etc. But in principle, anything that captures CO2 from the atmosphere, and I guess if it's agriculture that is promoting plant growth, sure. But whether it will be well, agriculture right now is responsible for around 20% of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. Whether urban agriculture will become a carbon sink, probably more promise lies in afforestation and forest management, but we need to I think we need to look more broadly at the challenge, and I don't think urban farming itself will be revolutionary. Though again, this is my personal opinion. I think we need to wait a little bit for some more research and possibilities of uptake. At what scale can that be practiced in?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mathieu. Now, Dr. Kamarul, we have a question from Michelle Gunn, and Michelle asks you, the COVID-19 crisis has caused this, of course, historic decline of global oil demand. Although this may not be a permanent scenario, do you feel that the oil and gas industry will actually bounce back to pre-pandemic business as usual stage, considering the increasing shift to clean energy?
Yeah, this is questions that I've been asking myself as well. So I do believe that we probably going to go back to pre-COVID 2019 level, but it's not going to be today. It's probably actually it's going to happen pretty soon. I believe probably towards early 2020, 2022. Okay. But in terms of investment, capital investment into the oil and gas, I think it's going to be very difficult to see the same thing that we see in the last 7-8 years. The reason for that is a lot of investment that have been put into oil and gas has never really bring back the returns. Okay, I show you the slides earlier on. I mean, in the past, Americas has a lot of money that has been put into what you call this what you call shale oil. Okay, and the investors start looking for their cash now. Okay, and they probably will be shy to put their money for the third round. That's why we've seen even the oil price has recovered. The Americans still now short of about 2 to 3 million barrels per day. So I do believe that in terms of the demand, we probably will see the restorations of demand pre-COVID times, but this is very much depends on a few things, depending on how quickly we roll out the vaccines and all those things. But the investment probably not going to be the same. Okay. So in terms of whether it's going to be business as usual, I don't think so. Okay, I think there is going to be a different way. People will be looking more in terms of how to cut costs because the cost will go further down from here onward. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Kamarul, for sharing your insights, and feels like that is the pulse that everyone is feeling within the entire sector itself. Now, a quick note to all our participants. We have roughly 5 or so minutes more to go before we end this part of the session, which is of course the final part. And we're still welcoming some questions from all of you for each one of our esteemed speakers. Moving on from there, I'd actually like to target this question towards Mattias. Now, Mustafa is asking about the manufacturing sector and moving towards digitalization in Malaysia. I'd like to make it a little bit broader. Using your expertise, what do you think are some of the challenges as well as opportunities for Malaysia when it comes to this?
I think it's great. I've been spending a lot of time in different factories in Malaysia, and one thing that strikes me there is the skill set of people and the ambition and the attitude. The digitalization as such brings a great opportunity. Once again, the future is not regionalized, nationalized, or globalized, it's digitized. And being able to provide better value to end customers and understanding and visualizing the supply chain and the performance of products through sufficient track and trace, through better continuous improvement or data-driven continuous improvement, I see a future where labor cost has an impact, but not as much as it used to have. It's more of the creativity of people and the way that we actually able to capture that, and using digital tools to bring value to the products that we're consuming, to the supply chain that we're using, and to the way that we're living our day-to-day business.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Mattias. Now from there, I've got a question for Mattias coming in from Vicky Yip. Vicky asks Mattias, how do we support young people to develop and use innovations in farming that reduce dependence on international corporations for inputs or fertilizers, as well as harmful agrochemicals?
This is a very pertinent question. I think dependence on inputs and is a big topic in general in agriculture, especially non-sustainable inputs. There's a big discussion now whether imports of certain let's say soybeans from certain parts of the world is an issue, because if farmers are committed to sustainability, they also want to depend on inputs that are harvested sustainably. I think, well, there's a whole approach of well, first of all, of diversifying production, and going to well, creating our own inputs that are sourced locally, and I think there's a move to that to become more independent. And I think it goes back to the supply chain idea of shortening it and being more local. But also producer organizations are coming together. We have to understand that there's a movement in some countries. It's more popular than in others that producers really come together and try to cooperate on production. But when it comes to dependence on all those things, we have a special incentive program in our common agricultural policy, which is new, called eco schemes. And eco schemes is basically a program where you will get direct payment per hectare if on that area you will promote and do sustainable farming. So agroecological farming, for example, not using inputs you're talking about, and not relying on the industrial inputs. So and farmers will be rewarded by performing agroecological practices, also carbon farming, etc. Also using precision agriculture, etc. And they will be incentivized by some financial aid. So this is one of the projects. And I think this is something that will hopefully make more traditional minded farmers move their mindset into the direction of more sustainability and relying on less environmentally friendly inputs. That's just kind of one idea. We have, we basically are also pushing for the so-called low-risk pesticides on the market. We're trying to create a regulatory environment which will promote those lower-risk pesticides. So this is a point of policy and kind of directing incentives again towards those. So there's also knowledge training and those kind of things that we try to teach them to go into this direction. So it's difficult to do it from the top down, obviously, but our member states, we work very closely with our member states. We're developing strategic plans for how to implement our common agricultural policy, and this is one of the areas that we also push.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mattias. It is about, after all, building a wider ecosystem that has to be supported by all these auxiliary efforts. From there, Dr. Kamarul, we have a question for you. This one is improving the environmental footprint to meet increasingly stringent standards a big challenge for the oil and gas industry?
It is. Oil and gas industry is about bringing hydrocarbon out from the reservoir to the surface. And that requires a lot of machineries to do that. But when you release the hydrocarbons, the byproducts of that, including gas, including water, so the environmental issues is very serious matters. That's why a lot of oil and gas industry put the tenets for them is the HSE is the most important things. In our organization, Uzmawe put HSE as number one. So it is a very difficult requirement, but it is a necessity things that we must do. Okay, there is a concerted effort and commitment not only from the service company but also obviously that coming from the government, coming from the regulators, and coming from the operator themselves about reducing this harmful gas and then preserving the environment. This morning I was giving a talk at the RESET programs where there's a Society of Petroleum Engineering. We heard about how some of the people already decided by 2025 there is no more flaring. This is not going to be easy because you will release gas, you're going to have the upset in the process, you will see, and this is going to be a technically challenging. And then also in terms of compliance is going to be very, very challenging. So it is remain to be seen how we're going to tackle this. But if you put your mind to it, and I'm pretty sure there is a solution towards that. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Kamarul. And we wish you all the best with your 60-40 by 2025, which is a short 4 years away now, actually.
Yeah,
gentlemen.
It is tough.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, with that, we've actually come to the close of our entire session. Of course, we still do have a couple of outstanding questions, but in the interest of ending on time, with that, I would like to once again thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us virtually. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we also hope that our participants have gained beneficial insights into the key industries represented by each of our esteemed speakers: manufacturing, agriculture, and oil and gas. And very quickly, I'd just like to express that while the pandemic has halted much, it's also been a once-in-a-lifetime chance to redefine globalization as we collectively move towards a post-pandemic era. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I'm Tehmina Kaoosji, your moderator, signing off on behalf of the World Islamic Economic Forum Foundation, wishing you all a very pleasant evening again. Thank you once again, gentlemen. I now hand the floor back to our host, SIDC and Encik Hadi.
Yes,
Most welcome.
thank you, Tehmina. Thank you, Mr. Mattias, Mr. Mashir, Dr. Kamarul, for the insightful discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, before we end the program, kindly complete and submit the post-test questions and the evaluation form. And the slide presentations and recording of this program will be made available in SIDC eLearn tomorrow at 5 p.m. onwards. On behalf of WIEF and SIDC, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers and moderators and to all virtual audience for your presence today. Assalamualaikum, thank you and have a good day.